bit about standing, posture, mechanics, all that stuff. There's a reading in the textbook that we have available for you as a PDF on the Foxtail that will sort of explain in more detail why we do that and help you to kind of reinforce and sort of hear that information in a different way, hopefully to help you. So, first few days of drawing one, we're going to work from still life, and you're going to kind of get tired of still life, but it's just so important because first of all, it sits still. So you can really practice all of the kind of important techniques that you're learning in the process. Another reason is, for still life, you can do this anywhere. We're going to be in the studio as much as possible, but sometimes you're going to be here out of class. Sometimes you're going to be doing your homework in here. There'll be times where you maybe are in your dorm. One of the favorite drawings I ever made back in 1999 when I took drawing one with Mo Brooker was of the tiny little coffee pot that made 4 cups that I had in my dorm room, my hairbrush, and an apple that I brought back to my room from the cafeteria. So anything works for a still life. It doesn't matter how weird or banal or where the objects come from. You can be expressive with a still life, or it can just be the objects are what they are, okay? So we've got lots of objects here in the studio from the still life cabinet. You want to start off simple because it doesn't matter how good you are at drawing. For these techniques, simple objects work best. And we also want to think about symmetry. Most man-made objects have some natural symmetry to them. We're starting here with these 3 easy things that we can kind of look at and take apart. Every object has a code, every object has a proportional system. There are ways of measuring everything to increase accuracy. Okay, so I'm starting really simple. Fake orange bottle that probably held something you all aren't allowed to drink. Water pitcher. That looks like a little water pitcher to me. I want a bigger one. Okay, so I've got my handy dandy viewfinder. You always need this every day. You've got to have it. Put your name on it because there's going to be 15 other people in the class that have a viewfinder. It also works as a hat when you're thinking. I've got my chamois. This one's really dirty. Yours is probably cleaner. And I've also got my vine charcoal or willow charcoal. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is divide my picture plane into quarters. Okay. It doesn't matter today whether or not you're drawing in a landscape format, which is this way, or a portrait format, which is this way. What matters is that you're holding your viewfinder and the orientation of your picture is the same, okay? One of the things we talked about in an earlier video is eye level and horizon line being the same. You want the middle of your picture essentially to be the horizon line or your eye level, okay? And that's going to make sense later when we start talking about intuitive perspective. So the middle of our viewfinder is our eye level, the middle of our picture is our eye level. We talked earlier about the measurements and that this is exactly proportional to this picture, and why that matters and why that works is so that when I look through this window and I close one eye, the view that I get there is the view that I want in my picture, okay? We're trying to translate that information to this space here, okay? And the reason, again, that we're thinking about our posture, we're standing, we're looking, we're extending our arm, we're extending this arm. This is all about translating what's there to there, okay? Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my viewfinder out, and I'm going to try to find the context for these objects. We don't want to just have objects floating in space. We want to ground them on the surface that they're on. They happen to be on this paper-covered little taboret stand. So I'm going to plant my feet. I'm going to make sure that I can pivot, like we talked about earlier. I'm going to take my view. And when I take my view, I'm going to try to sort of anchor it so that I don't have it moving. So I might just use the corner of the table in the front and put it down, rest the corner of my viewfinder down on the corner of the table. That's going to cut some of my objects off, but that's okay. And then I'm going to do something called measuring the intuitive perspective. And that means that I'm going to take my drawing tool and I'm going to close one eye. And I typically, for some reason, just close my my right eye. I don't know if that's because that's my dominant side or not, but you want to use always the same one. Be thinking about that. I'm going to close my right eye and then I'm going to place that tool on the edge of the table. What I'm trying to get is the tabletop first because I'm trying to create that context for the objects. So it's probably going to look something like this, that square of that tabletop in perspective. Okay? We're going to talk about perspective 1, 2, 3 point perspective later on in a series of videos. Right now we're doing intuitive perspective, and that basically just means like what can you visually gather without having to have any kind of mechanical optical system or scientific linear perspective system, just to translate that information quickly, just to figure out what's going on. So I'm going to plant my viewfinder. I'm going to find the edge of the table that's furthest away from me here on the left side. I'm going to find that line, and then I'm going to take that and I'm just going to pivot and make a mark on my picture to represent that line. Okay, does that make sense? So I'm closing my one eye, I'm resting my drawing material on the edge of the table to the left back side, not the front. And I'm going to take that mark and then I'm just going to kind of lay that down. It's all about making a mark and responding to it, okay? So once I get that back left one, I'm going to go with the back right one. I'm going to change my orientation a little bit. Lay that there, pivot, make a mark. Now I'm going to do the front corner. Lay that there, make a mark. Side corner, make a mark. Now I know that when I had my viewfinder here, I planted the bottom of my viewfinder on that front corner. So I'm going to have kind of a point here at the edge. I'm going to go back and look at my viewfinder. That looks like it's not quite drastic enough, that last mark I did, so I'm going to remeasure. And I'm going to adjust, and I think actually that line is a little closer to there. And now I'm going to measure the front one again. That one seems right to me. And I measure the back one. That one seems pretty correct. I measure the back right. That one's a little off, so I'm going to adjust it. And then I can go in and wipe out any of the lines that weren't quite right. Now I have a tabletop to put my stuff on, okay? And I can put my objects down because I have some context. This intuitive perspective thing is often called clock face perspective. So if you think about a clock, an analog clock that has the hands, you know, the minute, the time, and you sort of stretch your material out, you know, this one here, this angle here, if I held it up, it might be, let's think about a clock, 2 and 8. Does that make sense? This is also in the textbook. There's a reference to it. So this is the first place I'm going to start, intuitive perspective, measuring the angles just by sight, not using any kind of scientific perspective. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to step way back. And I'm going to look at my drawing and I'm going to say to myself in my head, does that look like a tabletop that things could rest on without rolling off and falling down on the floor? And if it doesn't, I'm going to go back and measure again, make some adjustments. Does that make sense? Okay, intuitive perspective, there you go.